Right now, it's just started raining, so I think we're going to be good. And the presentation may not take an hour. We'll wait and see. But feel free to ask any questions, to speak out during the presentation. Don't hesitate. You can either use chat or just unmute, and I'm very comfortable with you asking questions or even making suggestions or sharing experiences that you had as well. So as Luke was saying, basically, the presentation today is going to focus on what I did with the iPads in my class. But first, we're going to start with a little kind of a presentation, not about the iPad, just about what we're going to be talking about. So I'm going to share my screen, and in this little Powtoon presentation, I'm going to give an example of what today will look like. So, Luke, can you see this?
Just coming up now, yes. Yeah.
Perfect.
I see the word started. There you go.
Using Powtoon.
I'm just going to shut this down and go back. So I thought first I'd begin by telling you how I got the iPads and how long we had them and how it evolved basically. So I wanted to start using technology in my classroom because I'd been teaching at this point for about 13 years, and I thought I want to change how I do things a bit. And I was always interested in technology, and I was always interested in using iPads for my classroom. So I got the dates written down here. So if I'm looking down, it's only because I'm looking at dates right now. In October 2019, I contacted Matt McGuire and Jeff Whipple, and they said if I wrote a proposal and talked about what student projects I had in mind, there was a good possibility that I could get a class set of iPads. So I did that in October of 2019, and it was approved. And I did get iPads in November of 2019. And we were very fortunate because we had them from November 2019 all the way to March 2020. But what happened in March was schools were closed because of the pandemic, and we never really got to finish a lot of the projects. So I was really fortunate because this school year, which was, last school, I should say, which was September 2020 to April 2021, I was able to get the iPads. They extended it because I was never really able to finish my first projects with that group of students. So Jeff and Matt were kind enough to extend that. So I had them pretty much all from September of last year all the way to April of this year. So I was really fortunate. And I have to say, we had a wonderful experience. Students learned so much faster than I gave them credit for. They were extremely engaged. I was a little worried, a little hesitant, because I thought, how am I going to use this and continue to teach the curriculum, make sure that it's curriculum based and curriculum driven? And I couldn't believe what they were teaching themselves, and I couldn't believe how fast people were learning. So what I'll start with today is I'm going to screen share again, and I'm going to show you just kind of here. So the first thing that we're going to talk about, and I'm assuming Luke, you can see this, right? So can people see this? Okay.
All good.
All good. Awesome. Thank you. So the first thing that our biggest project and the first thing that we started with this year was Minecraft, science, and literacy. So I fused the three so that we could create a community to protect itself from the spread of COVID-19. So what I'm going to start with is I wanted something different for science and I wanted to make it authentic. So what I decided to do is say, okay, we talked a lot about COVID. And then what I thought we would do for science is that have students use Minecraft to create a community, but this community would have to protect itself from the spread of COVID-19. So students worked in groups of 3. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to actually show you the video first so you can kind of visualize what they did. But because students are so interested in Minecraft, I thought this was a great way for them to use technology and use the iPads, but still make it curriculum based. And I'm going to talk after you watch the video and see what it looks like. Then I'm going to talk about how it started and how I incorporated and integrated the curriculum. So I'm going to show you a video right here. And these are 3 students that work together. And they created this final video. They use iMovie, the green screen, and they also used Minecraft as well. And I just took out the first little section because I didn't want their names there. But I did get permission from their parents to share this video. So this was their final project. I'm just going to share, and it is in French because it is a French immersion class, but this gives you an idea of what they did. And in the background, you can see here, they created this using Minecraft. So this was kind of the art and the science aspect of the curriculum. And the oral presentation, they're going to present their community. That was the literacy part. And I'll also talk about how they did research, how they had to build their vocabulary, how they had to collaborate and discuss what their community needed. So first I'll kind of present what their final project looked like, and I'll explain how I got there.
Tracy, you don't have volume on your video.
Sorry, yes, you're right. Let's do that again. I keep on forgetting that one. I'm glad. Thanks, Luke, for reminding me. All right, let me start over again.
On va te protéger nous contre le COVID-19. Premièrement, on va commencer avec les maisons. Il y a 6 différentes maisons pour protéger nous pendant qu'on fait de la quarantaine. La première maison est petite, mais c'est encore un chalet très confortable. La deuxième maison est un peu plus gros que la première maison. Cette maison ici est gris et gros. C'est parfait endroit pour choisir cet endroit et certainement grandir pour vous empêcher d'attraper le virus. La troisième maison est faite de briques et c'est plein de cochons. On ne sait pas pourquoi. Il y a plus de maisons, mais on ne va pas les décrire.
Here, I just want to stop it just to kind of share. So what they did is they said, we need a firm because for COVID-19, they're worried about food shortages. So they created this little farm. You see they have little pigs here and little animals. So I think they did a really good job here, and it was well thought out because the point of this project was not just to add flowers, the sunshine, anything that you added. I had a rubric, and anything that you added in a project had to have a purpose. So everything that you see in their video has to have a purpose, and they had to kind of explain why they chose to have those things there. So I'll continue on with the video. Are there any questions so far?
Tracy, what grade level was this?
Grade 5.
Okay.
Maintenant, on va faire le film. La ferme est remplie de nourriture pour nous nourrir. À l'intérieur de l'énorme conteneur derrière nous, il y a de l'eau fraîche pour l'aider à faire pousser nos plants nourrissants. La garderie est simple et unique, mais c'est aussi protégé par les enseignants de garderie. Les enfants et les enseignants sont obligés de porter les masques. On a décidé de construire la garderie parce que les travailleurs essentiels ont besoin d'une place pour laisser ses enfants jeunes pendant qu'ils font de la travail.
So here they built a daycare and they said, these are for essential workers that need to go to work and they need a safe place for their children. But they also talked about how they need a mask. It was very science oriented in that sense that it was well thought out. So this is a daycare that they built so that essential workers could go to work and their children had a safe place to go to.
Il y a aussi une école pour les enfants qui est plus âgée. La seule fois que l'école est fermée est pendant les tempêtes de neige et l'été. Oh, et le COVID-19, mais pas toujours un exemple. On est chez l'école maintenant, pendant le COVID-19.
So if you went back here, they built a school, and what they explained is they separated the desks so that students were protected. And they said the only time that school should be canceled is during a snowstorm. But they also said that they didn't want school canceled pretty much during COVID-19. So they looked for ways to separate the classrooms so that they still had the opportunity to come to school. So there's some thought process put in there, as you can see.
Non, pendant le COVID-19. On a aussi construit un laboratoire secret. On ne va pas aller dedans parce que on n'est pas supposé. Tout conseil est que le vaccin regarde comme ceci et qu'ils font le vaccin avec les outils comme ceci. Ça, c'est pourquoi on a fait un laboratoire secret pour faire le vaccin.
So during science, we talked about the vaccinations, and what they're saying here is that we have a vaccination, but we're going to keep it quiet right now. So we're not going to show you. It's going to be private because they're in the process of making a vaccination. So they did talk about vaccinations and need for them, past vaccinations. So there was a lot of science involved with that and a lot of research as well. So they have a secret laboratory that they're working on for the vaccination.
Au revoir. Je suis Sydney. Je suis Eva.
Oh, no, that was a So were there any questions so far? Because now I'm going to talk about, now what I'm going to focus on is we're going to go back and I'm going to talk about how we integrated that into the curriculum and what exactly I did. But are there any questions so far? Yeah, sorry. So are there any questions so far?
Folks, you can either put your mic on to ask the question or do it in the chat window. Tracy, do you have access to the chat window?
I can in a second, sure. I'm just going to go here. Can you read the question to me?
Sure. Sarah wanted to know, how did you embed the kids into the video?
That I'm going to get to next. There, I opened the chat right now. I'm going to get to that next. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to kind of show how that process happened. So that's a really great question, Sarah. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to kind of, Sarah, that's where I was going to go next. So first of all, we started with a lot of literacy, a lot of research and vocabulary. Because it is a French immersion class, they didn't really have the vocabulary. So we use the iPads. They focused on vaccinations, laboratories, how they're going to protect themselves in schools, what things actually mean. And then they also learned a lot of new rich vocabulary related to that theme. So just the reading and the research part itself took about a week and a half. So we started this in, I think it was the middle of September, towards the end of September. And for a week and a half to almost 2 weeks, 3 times a week for 45 minutes, this is what we worked on. But it was all reading in French, it was learning vocabulary, and it was all researching in French. So that I included in my reading and my vocabulary building. So that was the first thing that we did. Then we went on to including writing. So once they had the vocabulary, they built their community using the iPads and Minecraft. That's where the art came in. So every Friday, they would sit together, 3 students, and they said, okay, now we have the vocabulary, now we've done our research. Now we're going to build a community based on research that we found. So what they did with that is they went into their iPads, they learned from each other, because not all kids were familiar with Minecraft, and this is what I really liked. They all worked together, and I would just walk around the classroom because I don't know how to use Minecraft. I'm going to be honest with you, I still don't know how to use it. But you always had one leader in every group of 3 that was familiar with it. So I set up my group so that I knew one person has played Minecraft, they're experts, I'm going to depend on them. So those people that were really strong with Minecraft, they were the host, and they would set up their world. And that was the art part. So that part there took about, I would say, about 3 or 4 weeks. So, but that was 60-minute classes of art. So what they did together is they built their community. And that part there, they really enjoyed, because they were engaged, and they would be talking about, okay, why do we want this? Maybe we'll take this out. Maybe we'll keep this. Maybe we'll add that. It was really neat. As I was walking around, it was really neat to hear them collaborate, come up with ideas, and think critically about what they were creating. Because remember, I said I had a rubric, and everything that you built had to have a purpose. Even if you built a person, even if you built a cow, it had to have a purpose. And that's, I'm going to go next to kind of what Sarah's talking about. Then I incorporate the art, and this is where they used a green screen. So in order, I don't know if your school has green screens, but we do. We have a few of them. We use a green screen to tape the students. So we recorded them. That's what we did. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to share something with you that'll kind of give you an idea of what it looked like. But in order to do this, every iPad needs doing. And what we did at our school, we purchased the program, and it's $6.99 per iPad for the program. But what we did, for every group of 3, we purchased one program, and all 3 students were able to use that one iPad to create their movie. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you this. So Sarah, this goes back to your question. So once students built their iCraft community, from there, they wrote a script. And that was the writing part. So I included literacy in that section. So like I said, first they started with, let's do the research. What do we want in our community? And the next step is they built the community using Minecraft. The third step was, now we're going to write our script, because we have to do this, we have to present. So we have a huge green screen at school. And what you do is you tape, this is one boy, this is an example, but we taped our 3 students. So we taped the 3 students in front of a green screen, and they presented their project. And what you do is, see this is his background now. So originally he was taped right here using a green screen. But what the students do, this is the doing program, or they also call it doink, but it really is doing, but you'll hear doink as well. So what they did is you add your Minecraft community here. So what this little boy did, he's presenting his family, and he took pictures. He built this separately, and he took pictures. And what he did is you add this part here, and they blend together. And when they blend together, this is what comes out. So what we did is we put in this section right here, the students learn how to use this program by themselves. This was also part of their art class. They worked together in teams of 3, And the way that I organized it in my classroom, I said, okay, here's the thing, I'm going to walk around. What you have to do is you have to figure this out yourself first. You have to try with your group first, and then they had a sister group. So if they didn't understand something, they said, I'm not sure how to do this part. They had to figure it out themselves first. And if they couldn't, they went to a sister group. And they asked the sister group and they said, do you know how to do this? And if they didn't know, then they would ask another group. So I was the last person that they were supposed to ask. So they had a checklist. Did I check with this group? Did I check with this group? Because what I wanted them to do is learn from each other. That was my point. My role was to just walk around and facilitate. They were to learn from each other. And all this was done in French, which was good because I could walk around and make sure they were only speaking French. And they did a great job at that. So here, as you can see, this is where they put their Minecraft community. We taped them and it blended together. And this is kind of what it looked like. So I'll just kind of play here. You'll hear the boy talking. So, and this is what they did. So basically, in reality, this boy is actually in front of a green screen. And even though he's using his hand gestures, he knows his practice and he knows when to use it. So he added the picture afterwards to make sure that the picture, this was the picture, matched what he was saying. So does anybody have any questions so far? Luca, are there any questions in the chat?
No, there are no other chats. Nope.
Perfect.
Sarah says thank you.
You're welcome. So that was how I integrated all of those things together. Was I just I included art, I included literacy, and I included a lot of writing and speaking skills. So if there are any questions about the doing program or green screen, please feel free to ask them. But even before the green screen, they had to use iMovie to record what they wanted to say. So we would practice using iMovie just to make sure that they were ready for their presentation. So first we used iMovie just to practice, then we went to the green screen afterwards. And that's how they presented their community. And the nice thing about this was I was able to send that home and show parents. And the way that I used YouTube to do it, and the way that I shared it was that it was private and parents couldn't share it with anybody else. So I mean, it was making it private for the other students as well. And I had permission from parents. I asked and they approved it. And they said yes or no, yes, you can share, or no, you can't. But most parents, I was fortunate, said yes. And I was able to send it to parents so parents could see their child's work. What was really impressed was a lot of parents said, I didn't know that my child could speak French that well. So a lot of this went home so that when parents got the rubric, they're able to see, okay, well, this is how she graded them. And okay, I can see, yeah, no, they didn't memorize their lines. So that's why it's not a 4, or they're able to take a look at it. And so the art classes, as I said, there were about 4 60-minute art classes. So it took a good month just to do the taping part, but that included getting to know the green screen, learning it, and practicing with the iMovie. So really that wasn't a whole lot of time if you kind of put it into perspective, because first they had to practice using the iMovie, write their script, and then they went to the green screen, and then they had to create their movie at the end. Are there any questions about Minecraft? And are there any comments, any suggestions, anything that you want to share at all about their project with Minecraft Science and Literacy? Okay, so is everyone comfortable with me moving on to Flipgrid? I'm assuming they are. This year I used Flipgrid quite a bit in my classroom and I loved it. We focused on a lot of projects, but I'm going to talk about the 4 main ones that we did. At the beginning of the year, I taught students how to use Flipgrid, and we did a project where they had to introduce themselves and their family. So that was done in September, and that went so well that in October, I asked them for their homework, I asked him to introduce a precious object, and that wasn't in October, sorry, that was in December. So some students introduced their Christmas tree, an animal. So I was really looking and assessing their speaking skills. Then in October, each student wrote a scary story. And what we did is we put it on Flipgrid, and because we couldn't go to other classes, we put it on I sent out an invite to all teachers, and on Halloween, teachers could read whatever story they wanted through their class. So if they want to read 3 stories, they could pick any student they want. So all my students wrote a story. They all taped it on Flipgrid. And what I did is I created an invite for all teachers, and teachers decided whether or not they wanted to have a story read to their class, and they would pick exactly the student that they wanted to read to their class. So that was really interesting. We also did Flip Ami, which is like pen pals, but Flipgrid friends with another class. And what they did is they went back and forth and introduced themselves, talk about what they liked, talk about what they didn't like. But we went back and forth with another class, and it was really neat to do that because we couldn't see other classes last year because of the bubble. So it allowed us to connect with a grade 3 class, which was really interesting. And all that was done in French. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share one of the Flipgrid videos of someone introducing an object. And I just want to say the thing about Flipgrid that scared me is I was worried because you can comment on somebody's video, but then I learned through my settings that not everybody can view. You can hide them. You see, this is all hidden. So no one can view this video but me. Because I was worried about students going back and forth and making comments and using it as a social media platform, because they are still young. You do run a lot of risk. But what I did is I hid it so that I was the only person that could see it. Nobody could comment but me because I would respond. But the nice thing is I did this for homework, and I did it in a classroom, and I marked students on their presentation skills. So I had a rubric, and then parents could see the rubric, but they could also, I could send this video to parents just through their email. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you a video, and I have permission from this girl's mom to show this video. And this project was homework. And what she had to do is present something that was precious to her. So we practiced in class. We kind of did a vocabulary bank, and we did everything and in class to prepare them. And when they went home, this is what their homework was. Once again, the story is in French, but I do teach a French classroom, so it makes it harder. I didn't have anything in English to present, so I am sorry about that. And Luke, I'm just going to make sure that you can hear the volume on this.
Yeah, we got volume. Oh, I thought we did. Sorry, Tracy.
Sorry, what's that, Luke?
I thought we had volume, but no, it just cut out.
I just cut out? Okay,
Yeah.
no problem. Was it playing at first?
I thought when you asked the first time, I thought I heard volume, yes.
Okay, and I'm wondering too, it might be my connection here as well, but I'm going to share it again. And what I'll do is, I'll stop screen sharing on here. And that happens sometimes because I went from one to the other. And I'll just start sharing again. That's what I'll do.
Thanks, Tracy.
I realized what happened there, Luke. What happens is when I go from Smartboard to videos, the volume turns off every time.
Okay.
And this should work now.
Did you go back to screen share?
Not on screen share?
No.
Okay, no problem. I'm glad you're here. Thank you, Luke. I'm glad you're keeping me in check. I appreciate it. Now I can guarantee that we are on screen share.
Okay.
There. All right. We'll get it this time. I promise.
Bonjour.
There you go.
Thank you.
Bonjour.
Quel est l'objet que tu présentes?
L'objet que j'ai présent aujourd'hui, c'est un peinture de Stitch.
Quel âge a cet objet?
Cet objet, c'est 2 mois passés.
Quand as-tu eu cet objet?
J'ai eu cet objet 2 mois passés dans le milieu d'octobre.
Quelle couleur est cet objet?
Cet objet, c'est bleu, noir, blanc et rouge, jaune et orange comme dans le coin.
Est-ce que c'est large, petit, grand, dur, rond ou carré?
C'est très grand, c'est dans le carré. Je pense que c'est dur. Oui.
Ok. Est-ce qu'il y a des dessins sur ton objet? Si oui, décris-le.
Il y a un dessin sur mon peinture. J'ai peinture Stitch. Stitch est une personne dans mon film préféré. Il y a bleu et il aime beaucoup bleu. Préfère clair.
Pourquoi cet objet est-il précieux, toi?
C'est précieux parce que j'ai peinture cet objet et je pense que c'est très beau. J'aime Stitch beaucoup. C'est comme mon préféré peinture.
Ok.
Merci pour écouter. Ok, au revoir, merci. Bonjour, mes amis.
Bonjour.
So you can see that she's pretty excited there. I love her enthusiasm in this video, but the point of this was to make sure that she was using the proper terminology, and she did that various times. So I was able to really assess the terminology she was using, but she was very engaged. And the interesting part of that video is I taught her older sister, and I told the students, I said, it doesn't matter to me what object you present. It has to be something that you're comfortable presenting. And I said, it doesn't matter. Be creative. How you want to present it is really up to you. So it really gave them that choice. And for her, she decided, I'm going to do this as an interview style with my sister because she was a bit nervous, and it made her more comfortable knowing that her older sister was going to help her with that. And the nice thing about this is you can really tell, like, she was using that rubric. She was trying to describe her object by using words like it's hard, it's large, it's my favorite. She presents who it is, Stitch. So she really looked at her rubric, and what I was looking for is she using the words that I taught in class? And she was. And I really appreciated her enthusiasm at the beginning and throughout the video as well. But it was kind of funny because you could tell her sister's a little older. She just wasn't as enthusiastic as what the younger girl was. But anyway, so I'm able to send those home, which is really neat because parents never really sometimes have the opportunity to see or hear their child speak in French. So parents really appreciated that. Now I'm going to ask you a question. Flipgrid is really easy to learn. I just spent a little bit of time. I went on YouTube. I learned how to use it. It's very engaging. One of the questions I've had, I've used it quite a bit in class. I've used it for math. I've used it for stations. But I'd like to hear from you. Have you used Flipgrid? And if so, in what capacity? Or do you know anybody who used Flipgrid? Or do you have any suggestions of how it can be used? Because I really strongly encourage teachers to use it. Students like it. It's also a great way in math for them to explain how they used a concept or how they learned a concept. And it's really good to hear them because of the fact that sometimes they don't have that opportunity to explain it orally. So it was really nice for me to experience. Any questions about or any suggestions, or where have you saw somebody use Flipgrid? And you can use a chat as well. Could you see this working in your classroom? Does anyone have an idea how it could work? I used it for centers as well. I used it for math centers where I gave them a word problem and I said, I'd like to see how you did this, and I would give them manipulatives, and that was one of my centers. And one suggestion I have is having microphones if you're going to do that, because sometimes I couldn't hear the students because I could hear myself teaching in the background, or I could hear other students explaining their concept. But do you see it working anywhere else in your classroom? Even for literacy? Yeah, Sarah said you haven't used Flipgrid, but I would like to learn. It is really easy to learn. I was surprised. And what was really cool is students would make videos and they were able to add some art to it. You can change certain things, you can add features, and they really enjoyed that. But what was really interesting is when I taught them Flipgrid, and it didn't take long at all, they would sit in groups of 2 or 3, and then they would teach each other something new. So there were things that I didn't even know that my students found out, that they said, oh, Madame Trudeau, did you know that you could add this, or you can add an image, or you can go on the internet and add an image from here. So they were doing a lot of things like that. So it's really interesting. Are there any questions about Flipgrid at all? And does anybody have any concerns about the privacy? Because that was a big concern of mine. I talked to Jeff a lot about that. I talked to my principal, my vice principal, and that's why, like, I know some people had chats and some people keep the chats open, and I didn't do that just because it was my first time using Flipgrid, and not that I didn't trust my class, but I didn't know if I want to go down that road yet. I wanted more experience with Flipgrid before I opened up the discussion for other students, because you can respond. That little girl's video, students in my class could have responded to that, but I didn't let them just because I wasn't sure the maturity level at that point. But just to go back, before we started Flipgrid, I let them know what the rules are, and I monitored, and I told them I was going to be monitoring, and I said, like, I really enforced and I really talked about consequences, about, you know, what happens when you say things using social media, and being responsible learners. And I also talked about the iPads being a resource tool. So I said they weren't something that they're fun, they're engaging, but I told them, I said, it's like a dictionary. It is like a book. I told them, I said, this is your learning resource. And there were times when I did have to take iPads away from students, not very long. I'd take away for 5 or 10 minutes. If they weren't on task, I'd take it away and I'd go back to them in private and I'd say, are you ready to learn? Because remember, this is a learning tool. So sometimes I did catch them doing other things, drawing or taking a pen and doing a little bit of art. And whenever I did that, it was very important for me to stop it right away, because I want them to know that the point is for them to stay on task, because they can easily go off task, and I don't blame them. So we did have some issues with that. I'll talk about those challenges after. But yeah, no, it is a great learning tool for students. It's a great platform, but it's a wonderful assessment tool as well for us. So you see, Tammy is, Tammy Best just said, yeah, if my students teach me all about it. And they will, Tammy, I'm going to tell you, they will teach you all about it. It is amazing what they found. I had one boy who I was really impressed with. He caught on immediately to technology, and he was showing me things that I didn't know. And what was interesting about him was that he would actually send me a Flipgrid video just privately to myself to say, oh, Madame Thibodeau, I won my hockey game. And he would show me his hockey stick. So I thought that was really interesting, because he wasn't quiet by any means, but he was a private little boy. And so he would make a video and just send it to me, and talk about his hockey stick or his team. So I really did enjoy that. Our home and school fundraiser for years purchase one class. Yeah, that, and Tammy, that is really hard. We have that same issue at school, because I had 21 iPads for my class, and we also have another 20 iPads in the school. And we have a sign-out policy, which is working really well, but it is hard because you don't always have a class set of iPads. But what I did, this was really interesting, because we have our 20 iPads for the school. And when I wasn't using my 21, teachers signed them out. So I would use my iPads. I'm going to say some days it all depends, 50% of the time, 60% of the time, and other times it's just 10% of my day. So if I knew I wasn't using them as much, I'd say they're available in the afternoon. Please sign them out as a class set if you want to, or you can have 4 or 5. So I had a sign-out policy. We have a sign-out policy for the school, and then I had my own one for the 21 iPads that I had. But it is an issue, and I understand it. It's too bad we didn't have a class set for everybody. We ran into that issue as well. Another thing that we did learn, I'm going to share my screen again, is we did incorporate Sway for writing. And for Sway, it was really interesting because I don't know if you know, Sway is very much like PowerPoint. Yeah, it's kind of like doing a PowerPoint presentation, but it's very, you can add images. You can create a digital story to present. And I really enjoyed it because Sway allowed students to, it was great for students, how am I going to say this? It was great for students who struggle with spelling because the iPads were there, especially in French. The iPads were there and it would help them with the spelling. So it wasn't Sway, but it was the iPad itself that would help them. So when they used Sway, they wrote a lot better because of the iPads, because they had that translation. They had that online thesaurus, they had that online dictionary, which made it really easy. And it was really helpful. I had one boy who really struggled with writing, but it was interesting because he could speak very well in French, but to spell and to write was just a real task for him. And he tried really hard. He just really, at this point in his life, that's what he struggled with. And what he would do, he would use the iPad, and he would speak into the microphone, and it would help with his spelling. It would spell out a lot of what he wanted to do. And I also teach English, and he struggled in English as well. So together, him and I would use a microphone. He'd say, this is what I want to say. And he would put it in a microphone, and it would come up, and he would look at what it said, and he'd say, no, that doesn't make sense. I don't think this is spelled right, or I don't think this is spelled right, or this is exactly what I want to say. So it really helped him in both French and English. But we use Sway a lot. And the reason I use it a lot as well is because I could share the Sway projects with their parents privately. So if I'll give you an example, for Black History Month, they had to write about an influential Black leader. And what they did is they wrote about them and they got the pick. And in that presentation was sent through Sway to their parents. And at home, some of the students told me, they said it was really nice because they said their parents went through the presentation with them and they talked about it and they helped them and even helped correct. One boy said, and I'm Thibodeau, I don't know if I know, I like that. He goes, my dad made me sit down and he corrected some stuff and added to it. And I thought that was fantastic because his dad was engaged and his dad took that as an opportunity for him to sit with his son and say, you know what, this is fabulous work. And, you know, let's see what we could have worked on. So their Sway presentations were sent home and we worked on them in class. And they were quite engaged because a lot of the times they could add images. But my rule was first, you had to, we kind of went traditional. First, you had a graphic organizer. Well, first you picked your topic, you did your research. Then we did a graphic organizer. We use the iPads a lot for the research as well, because we don't have very many English books. And so I was really grateful for that. And we also talked about the internet, being really careful, thinking about the information that you're reading. Is it coming from a good source? And I really helped them with that first. We talked about that. We talked about plagiarism. And I could pretty much tell you who plagiarized in class. There were some lines that were plagiarized, and I'd go to the student and say, were these your words? And they'd say, well, no, I didn't know how to paraphrase. So I would help them with that. I didn't get mad at them. What I said is, let's look at this as an opportunity. How can we reword this together? And so we used Sway quite a bit in class, and it really did help engage those students with writing. So first they would do their research using the iPads, then we put everything on a graphic organizer, and from the graphic organizer, they would take that information and they would put it into Sway. And like I said, Sway is very much like a PowerPoint presentation. And so that's what we used. And then at the end, they had their final product, and it looked really cool because they could add their images at the end. And that was the deal. First, you do the writing. Then I don't mind if you add the images once your writing is done. And Sway helped with autocorrect as well, so that was really good. Are there any questions at all about Sway? Has anybody used it in their classroom? If you haven't, sorry, it's really easy to learn. It's part of Office 365. I'm sure you saw it before. It's if you know how to use PowerPoint, you will easily learn how to use this. The only thing with this is you have to, I forgot to tell you that you have to get students set up with their password and their username. And I'm going to talk about that in the challenges because that was a challenge at the beginning of the year. But your students, first of all, have to be set up with their password and with their user name as well. Oh, Katie, good to hear. So, and Katie, you don't have to share, but I think parents probably really appreciated that. Use it as a weekly newsletter to parents because you would inform them. And if you do want to share something, feel free to just unmute yourself. That's up to you. But I bet your parents loved it. I'd like to know if you got any feedback from parents, or if you got any feedback at all, and if you found like you had a good experience with it, and would you use it with your students? So if you want to write in the chat, would you use it with your students? And did you get any feedback from parents? Or if you want to share, feel free to. And if anyone wants to share, I'm just going to just pause for a second to see if anyone wants to share anything, or if anyone wants to add anything or give me some ideas. The Sway presentations were also cool because not this year, but the year before, I used it for my persuasive writing. And so they had to persuade our principal at the time that they wanted recess extended for their persuasive writing. And for our vice principal, they wanted something, they wanted more Gagaball pits. That's what they wanted. So they had to send a Sway presentation persuading our principal and our vice principal to do something. And they also wanted a change of the menu. So they for the hot lunch menu, they sent that to somebody as well. They wanted some more food added to their choices, basically. So I used it for persuasive writing as well. And we were able to send it to our principal and vice principal and another teacher. And the nice thing was that they responded. And so some of them came back personally to the class, or some of them came back and responded through Sway themselves about why they could or could not do that. Yeah, Katie Saunders said, use it with students for a few times, but have big plans to use it this year. Yeah, so do I as well. I love that it makes your presentation professional, how easy it is to share with other students, staff, and parents. And I completely agree with you on that. And Tammy, thank you. Everyone else, each ed center has a set of iPads. Teachers can sign out. That's right. And Tammy, to add to that, if you talk to Jeff Whipple about it and Matt McGuire, there are iPads that you can sign out. You can write a proposal and you can talk to them about it. They've been great. They've been great in helping me with the proposal. And Jeff gave me some wonderful ideas, things to do with the iPads that were project-based. So we're going to move on to the next one. Next thing, which is Microsoft Forms. So I got this right here. I personally love Microsoft Forms a lot. And what it is, and I'm just going to go right here. I use Microsoft Forms for homework, for bell work, for centers as well. We have that on our Office 365. And I started to dabble with it probably in about December or January because I wanted it to assess students. And I got really excited because in the morning, my students would come in. And the way that I started really small. I started with 2 questions, 2 math questions. And sometimes they're open-ended questions, sometimes they weren't. So I started really small, and the students have to have an email account. So they have to have their username, their password. They have to go into their email, basically. So I would make the questionnaire up in advance. So this is kind of what it looked like. So if you were a student, this is what my forms would look like in the morning time. So this is for homework, but I did do, let's go to a math one right here, there. Luke, can everybody see this? I'm assuming they can because I'm screen sharing.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, So this was one of them that as I got better at it, and as my students got more comfortable, this is one that I asked with a few more questions, because I was able to in the morning ask more questions as time went on. But I started with 2 questions, 1 or 2. And here's why I really like Microsoft Forms. See this? It gives me the results right here, how students did. But what I really love about it, that day I got 8 responses, which means not everybody finished, but that's okay, because I still saw the responses that were sent in. So sometimes I asked a lot of questions only because some students were really quick at answering the questions and some weren't. But even if a student didn't complete it, they could still send in what they had. Here are my questions that I asked, and it told me I had 7 responses. What I really enjoyed about this is I can go into every student's account and see how they did. So this student here, I hid their name. It's just at the top here. This is what the student responded with. So this, he was right about this. This student was right about this. And I went down, I said, okay, all right, so there's a mistake here somewhere. Okay, so I'll have to talk to him about this. So he was completing this every morning for bell work, not this question, but something similar to this. So he came in that morning, and he got his iPad. He knows it's ready to go. I sent it to students that morning. He would come in, and as I'm going around and getting the results, so I'm walking around my classroom and they're filling out these questions, and I noticed, okay, he doesn't have this one right. So I went and I saw him. I said, why don't you take a look at this one again? And then, so I would tell him, okay, take a look. Do you have a question about this one right here? I wouldn't say you got it wrong, but I'd say, I take a look at number 5. And he knows he got it wrong because it'll tell him he got it wrong. But everything else he did quite well. And for forms, I did realize that he did get this right, but he may have forgotten a period or he may have forgotten a capital letter. So I had to check it over. That one was wrong, but this one here is just because he didn't have an S. So it'll mark it as wrong. But at least I got to see his answer and say, okay, no, because he said, Madam Tutor, I'm pretty sure I got this right. And I'd say, well, you just forgot an S somewhere. So they would say the whole sentence was correct, but the moment you make one little error, it'll come as wrong, basically. But he saw his results. And what I really liked about this, if I go back, the response is, if I just go to right here, let's say I saw, okay, this one here, students did quite well. I probably don't have to teach that concept again. This one right here, most of my students got, 100% of my students that answered this, the people that answered, 100% of them got that right. Then went down here and I said, okay, all right, we need to look at this again in class. There's a pattern here. Not everybody's getting this. But if you go into here, you can actually see which students got it right and which students didn't, which is really interesting because I know which students ended up getting it wrong, and which students ended up getting it right. But this means right here that I probably should teach that to the class again. This one right here, more than likely most students got it. I loved Microsoft Forms because when it came in the morning, they had something to do. I would incorporate spelling into it. I would incorporate math. This one here was more of a math one, but it was also sentence structure. You can incorporate anything at all. I've even played little games like which student in a class has a dog named Brownie? Which student has a sister named Eva? So I'd even ask questions like that, but they had to respond in full and complete sentences, which is really important in French immersion. So this was my forms that I would have, and I'd do that with 3 times a week. I'd have that ready for them. And it was interesting because when we didn't have the iPads in the morning, one of my students asked, they said, how am I going to show you my answers? And I said, well, we're going to go back to using, we're going to be going back to using a whiteboard or paper and pen. And she goes, oh, right, I didn't think of that. So she was so used to the iPads that she didn't think. She's a Madame Thibodeau. She goes, I really like those iPads and I got used to them. So she said, I'm not sure if I want to go back to a whiteboard and printing. I said, well, we do have to go back to that. I did have homework, and I like that I did this with homework as well, because I was nice, because this was always due on Friday, and this was part of my homework. It wasn't just the only thing that I did. But here's what I found interesting. If I sent something through Microsoft Forms, 90% of my students did their homework. If it was pen and paper, I struggle to get homework on Fridays, and I don't know why. That's just the way it is. But I think that what had happened is on Wednesday, I'd say, hey, so-and-so, Johnny, didn't get your homework yet, just want to remind you it's due on Friday. There was that accountability there and say, oh yeah, that's right. And a nice thing is it corrected it for me. So this one right here, it was great because I would be able to review the responses, and it told me how many people responded. And here I had 14 responses, so 2 people didn't do their homework that time. And I can go to Excel, open it up, and look at the results. So I loved using forms. I strongly suggested. It's easy to create. You can do tons of things with it, and students really loved it. Are there any questions about forms?
Tracy, we've got a couple minutes left.
Okay. Oh, there. Okay, well, what I'm going to do, Luke, because this went by a lot faster than I thought. Are there any questions, or are there any things that you've observed in your school that you saw that was really amazing? I did want to add that we also used RazKids, Splash Learn for a lot of those programs that help with reading, that help with math. But I do want to talk to you about some of the challenges that I did have. First thing was remembering your password. And that I had laminated. I sent it home to parents so that they had it as well. They had it laminated for home and laminated for school. You have to practice. You have to practice in September, and you have to be patient because kids are going to forget them. I think the biggest challenge that I had was having to remember their password and their username. That was one of the challenges. Another challenge that we had is sometimes the computer is disconnected, but students taught themselves how to reconnect. And we were lucky we had 3 extras in a classroom. So we would go back and we'd get number 21 if one wasn't working. But also, it also taught us how to be flexible. Sometimes if someone's iPad wasn't working, they had to team up with somebody else. So we always had, for every challenge, every obstacle, we always found something, a success. Another issue was that some students weren't on task with them. When I introduced the iPads at the beginning of the year, I walked around a lot, I observed, I took iPads away. It made some kids unhappy, but that's what I had to do in order to make sure that they were used properly and used as a learning tool. Another thing that I did a lot of the times is I said, because at first they were excited, but that novelty wore off really fast. One thing I'd say, if this was their iPad, I don't know if you can see this, I'd say flip your iPad over gently, put it on your desk. And we practiced that. It took a little bit, do it again. So anytime when I was teaching, I just automatically said, okay, now it's teaching, put your iPad down on your desk and flip it. I'd walk around, and they were really great at it. If you're going to use iPad, start slow. Start really slow, have one goal every day. Say, today, I'm just going to teach them how to be gentle with it. I'm going to teach them how to flip it over. The next day, I'm going to teach them just their username, not their password, just their username. Type it in again. And they were getting really irritated with it, but I said, type it in again. And then we started with their password, but you have to have that available in advance for them. And I would walk around the classroom. So if you start small and if you stick to your guns, this can work. And it worked really well with my students. I had 18 students. They were the perfect class to start with. It brought them together in a lot of ways because there was a lot of collaboration with using the iPads. Are there any questions? Another thing too is you really have to model how to use apps, and you have to model good behavior with the iPads. We always model, like with Sway, I modeled slowly. And it took a long time in the beginning. There was a lot of work up front, but in the end, they were flying and they were going faster than I can keep up with sometimes. Are there any comments or anything? I have 10:45, Luke.
Okay, Sarah's typing there and some other people as well. So Tracy, on behalf of LearnEast 2021 and our participants, thank you for taking the time today to share things with us. Very interesting to hear at that level what kinds of things you're doing in the classroom and how you're incorporating technology within your students and all your different subject matter. Folks, I've put in a link to prizes. I know Jeff put it in a little earlier. Join us at the end of the sessions today at 3:45. As Jeff mentioned, you do not have to be here to get your prize, all kinds of different prizes. So with that, thank you, Tracy, and thank you for other participants who've participated today. Have a great day, folks.
Thank you, Luke, and enjoy the rest of your summer, everybody. And thank you for joining me. It was a pleasure to have you today. Thank you. Now I have to head home because of the tropical storm warning. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Take care.